All right, so fair warning to everyone, there might be some solo leveling spoilers throughout the video, so if that bothers you, please skip. But I kind of have a question about double dungeons, and I want to talk about them a little bit. Because as I was preparing for my first kind of YouTube series, comparing like the manhwa and the novel and kind of the anime, rereading the novel, which it's been a couple years, I realized when it talked about double dungeons, it brought up like a small to medium-sized guild that made it big overnight because of a double dungeon. It's not like a direct quote; it's vaguely based on memory. But with that being said, so they seem rare, similar to red gates that show up later on. But we see 2 red gates throughout the series, and we don't see anything else about double dungeons. And personally, I'm kind of curious why. I would have loved to see what a normal double dungeon looked like compared to the double dungeon that we saw. That was very much, I'm trying not to give too many spoilers, but, the temple, essentially. And I'm very curious if anyone has an opinion or thoughts as to why. Because on the one hand, it could be that the other, people that had talked about double dungeons were lying. I find that a little bit hard to believe personally, just because it was like a whole guild that apparently rose in ranks when it happened. It wasn't like one person who said, oh, there's a double dungeon, and it was like this, crazy person or anything like that. It was a whole guild. And it, the way that they worded it made it seem like, oh, maybe there's multiple, instances where this has happened, to the point where there is an association, like if this happens, you're supposed to let the association know. There was like a rule or guideline or whatever in place. So that brings me to this idea of, it seems like they're very legit. In my mind, I'm assuming it's kind of like a hidden boss, right? I don't play a whole bunch of video games, but that idea of, you go on in and, there's a boss and there's a chance that you could, get lucky enough to run into the hidden boss, right? So you have to clear the dungeon, and then you have to clear the hidden dungeon or the double dungeon, and you can get like bonus loot, right? Which makes sense with the way that they kind of talked about it throughout, that situation of, currently it wasn't all that good, like they didn't get a whole bunch of money and everything from it, but because there's a double dungeon, then theoretically, because it's like a hidden boss, they might get treasure or whatever it is, right? And again, it seems like this has happened before in the past, but it never brings it back up. Like there's no other point in the story where they go in and it's like there is a double dungeon, or you hear somebody else talking about a double dungeon. And I'm a little disappointed about it because I would have loved to see what a normal double dungeon looked like, right? Because again, just the way they talked about it seemed like they were in a D rank dungeon. So the, double dungeon boss should have been D rank, or at most, given my understanding of like video games with hidden bosses, it could have maybe even been a C rank dungeon boss, but that should have been about it, right? And obviously, the temple is way outside of their abilities or even, imagination. But I'm very curious what your thoughts are. As I'm delving more into the series and the storytelling and everything, because I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it when I first read it a couple years ago. I realized that was one key point that was just never really brought up again. Obviously, the double dungeon, like that specific double dungeon, is brought back up, when the main character, goes back into it. But yeah, it's never like a story point. You don't hear a lot about it. You don't really hear any other characters talk about it except that specific instance. But like red gates, as they talked about, were supposed to be equally as rare, but we see 2 of them throughout the story, and that's just what the main character deals with. That's not anywhere else. So again, my thoughts are maybe it could be this kind of faked style thing, but I find that really hard to believe because the association had rules about it, right? And it doesn't say if anyone else had ever reported it. In my mind, though, if the association had rules that had been in some way verified before, because they even said like, oh, we're supposed to let the association know, but let's at least try it ourselves, right? So it makes me believe that it has happened before. Maybe it's so rare that just never brought back up in the story. I really wish I would have been able to see a double dungeon and see kind of how it interacted compared to even just a typical dungeon or a red gate or something like that. But yes, I'm just very interested in your thoughts. As I was delving into the series a little bit more, that was the one point where I realized, I feel like I was missing a little bit something there. But I'm really excited just in general to get more into this like manhwa anime thing that I'm really excited about and making videos. Thank you guys so much. I'd love to hear your thoughts, or if there's anything that you guys would like to delve into as well. And I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your night. See you later.